The last one is, in order now, it is not enough that we have this heart of enlightenment. We have to, get to enlightenment. And in order to get enlightenment, we need to, you can call it practice or accumulation is a true thing. Accumulation of the merit and accumulation of the wisdom. Simply speaking, accumulation of merit, why is it needed? That again goes back to what we talked about karma yesterday. Right? Why is it that you are born very beautiful? Why is it you have a nose shaped like that? Why is your brother shaped differently but you are differently? Why are you successful? He is not successful. Why are we born this country, that? All of this, with all the wonderful thing we have, is because of the accumulation of the merit. Now, how do we accumulate merit? There, of course, we'll go into a little bit more, 6 paramitas, but simply speaking, every time we do prostration, offering, chanting, pilgrimage, generosity, not killing, ethics, all of these are to do with the accumulation of the merit. And accumulation of wisdom has to do with the meditation. Basically recognizing, familiarizing ourselves with the universal truth, with the visualization, with the union, with the emptiness, with the non-dual nature of the mind, with undefinable nature of the mind. All of these practices are the accumulation of the wisdom. And because of the accumulation of wisdom is the reason why when we recognize the Buddha within ourselves, we will get enlightened. Otherwise, even if we accumulate, even Buddha, even though he may have been born in a royal family and has all the auspicious signs, 32 signs, etc., if he did not have realized the nature of the things, the union or nothing exists inherent, the nature of the phenomena, Buddha will still be in the samsara, very happy samsara, but still in the samsara. Buddha is Buddha because he realized the nature of his mind, nature of all the phenomena. And that part of the Buddhahood is called the Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya refers to Buddha's enlightened mind. So Nagarjuna said very clearly, because of these two accumulations of the merit and the wisdom, because of the accumulation of merit in the future when I become Buddha, may I gain the Nirmana Kaya form, Tulpeku, and Sambhoga Kaya form, Longchen Zokbeku. And because of my accumulation of the wisdom, may I gain the Dhammakaya, or may I realize nature of my mind. So that is why all the practice that we are doing right now is a combination of these two. Every time we do green Tara practice, to offering flower and chanting the praises and compliments, etc., we are accumulating merit. And because of that, in this life, accumulation, merit, and purification, we will have good health, happiness, success, all of this. At the end of the day, again, we dissolve all the Tara into ourselves. And then when we do the visualization, when we do, for example, Tara, when we do Om Tare Tutare Ture, so there are certain visualizations which we will share later. So these parts, these visualizations, not only the visualization, but the dissolution, where even that visualization is dissolved into yourself. And then, all of these, both are in order for the accumulation of the wisdom to realize the inherent, the union nature of the form, sound, etc. That is the accumulation of the wisdom. From Mahayana perspective, these accumulations, the merit and the wisdom are called the 6 paramitas. The first is the generosity, ethics, forbearance. These 3 are the accumulation of the merit. Effort is something you need for the both. The concentration mind. After you have developed the concentration mind, and then looking into using that concentration to be aware of the one's own, the primordial nature of the mind, is the wisdom paramita. Right? So, generosity, ethics, and forbearance are the accumulation of the merit. Effort is needed for both. And the concentration and the wisdom paramita are the accumulation of wisdom. So with these 2 accumulations, one becomes enlightened from the Mahayana thing. And Vajrayana too is the same, but in terms of practice, there's a little bit, Vajrayana has its own speciality. Generosity, 3 types of generosity. generosity of the wealth, which generosity of the wealth protects the body. Right? If you give money to some food to somebody, it will sustain their body. With money, they can buy clothes, buy food, buy house. It protects or sustains their body. And second generosity is generosity of life. When someone about to die, you give them life, you save them, medicine, etc. That is the second level, higher level of generosity. And the highest form of generosity is the generosity of giving the Dharma, because that liberates them from lives and lives of endless cyclic existence. So when you are in the merit of the generosity, and Buddha Shakyamuni recommended us to practice the generosity first, because among the 6 paramita, generosity is the most easiest. And also in the human realm, all our human happiness are also dependent on material success. Without the wealth, it's difficult to be happy, as happiness is defined by us. So, and the cause of the karma of the material success is the generosity. So that is why Buddha said, first we practice generosity, then you will be wealthy. At least in samsara you will be have a luxurious, luxurious suffering, you can call it, Still suffering, but still a luxurious one, And then after that, when we practice ethics, even if you are a very generous person, but if we never practice ethics, ethics means, precepts, for example, I will not kill, I will not steal, I will not, etc. Even if you are a Vajrayana practitioner, yes, it is, or if you are someone who, among the precepts, the highest level of precepts of not harming other sentient being is called the bhikshu and the bhikshuni that keep 250 vows, basically from which promises that not to harm other sentient being from body, speech and mind. If you are able to be a bhikshu, bhikshuni, on top of that be a bodhisattva, on top of the Vajrayana, that is the best form of practice. But if you are not able to be a bhikshu or bhikshuni, it doesn't matter. That does not mean that you cannot practice Vajrayana. You can be a lay practitioner and still get enlightened. But at least the 5 precepts has to be kept. The first level of the precepts are basically designed so that we do not harm other sentient beings. Bodhisattva precepts are designed as such that we will benefit the sentient beings. So anything we do to benefit sentient beings. So basically whatever precepts, even the precepts, simple precepts like a nyungne, fasting precepts, where you say that for 24 hours, from today until the sun rises tomorrow, I will not kill, I will not steal, the 8 precepts. Even that much you can do is very much recommended, because Buddha said very clearly that source of wealth is generosity, but the source of the form of the human God, demigod is the precepts, ethics. If we do not keep any ethics at all in our life, even if you are a very generous person, in our next life it is said we will not get a human form or a god or a demigod form, but we will be born as something like a naga. Nagas are said to be in the animal realm, very wealthy, but they do not have a human form. They are still a part of the animal realm. Then after that is the forbearance. Forbearance means, the kind of bearing, having a bit of, the kind of, you can call it patience or forbearance. When someone is harming to you, that is the time if you can practice the, the patience towards someone who's harming you, someone who is trying to insult you and harm you in a certain way. It is said that anger can destroy the merits of many years, of many eons of accumulation, especially if directed towards bodhisattva. And similarly, there's no greater positive karma. One of the greatest positive karma is to control your anger, have the forbearance. How do we develop this forbearance towards the other beings? The food that feeds our anger is irritation. We get irritated, and then when irritation becomes too much, it becomes unbearable. So Shantideva has said, that we should train ourselves to bear the small difficulty first. So then if we have that we have no tolerance, no forbearance, everything starts to irritate us. We'll get angry with the sun, the dust, the moon. Everything irritates us. Some people doesn't look at you nicely, you get irritated, Maybe they are not looking at nicely because they are having terrible time. But you get irritated by people, the way people look, the food, the noise and everything. And why we are getting irritated is not because of them, it's because of us. Because we do not have any forbearance. Then after that is the effort, right? Effort also, there are three of effort. Effort like armor. That means before I do this practice, I am going to practice no matter what. That kind of commitment protects you. If you don't have a commitment, you will be like, oh, if I can get up, I'll do the practice. If I cannot get up also, it doesn't matter, When I feel like it, I will do it. If you feel like it, most probably we'll not feel like it. Because our negative habits are much more stronger than the positive ones. So that kind of commitment every day, whether it's an individual practice from this to this hour, identifying the time, the location for a practice. I will complete this retreat, I will complete this practice. That kind of commitment is called the joyful effort like armor. And then second one is when we do the effort, doing it joyfully, encouraging yourself, right? I have reached I've reached how much of age right now. I have done so many things in the past. Things, whether be it successful or whatever, now it's a memory. I have a little bit of time. And this time I'm doing something much more meaningful for the benefit of myself and all sentient beings. Let me do it happily, Why worry so much about things which we have to leave behind? So that kind of joyfulness, the last one is never to be satisfied. Satisfied with one's practice, satisfied with doing positive things. Say, I've done one retreat, now I will never go. Next year, December, I don't want to come to retreat, I want to go shopping, I will go for some winter vacations, right? Right? With the negative things, we are never satisfied. But with the virtuous thing, why should we be satisfied? Right? The fifth one is the concentration. Concentration also, there are three levels of concentration. When we are able to develop certain concentration, able to keep my mind with certain, that's called the child. Compared to Buddha, we are child, but so it's called childlike concentration. And then and then we can remain in the one pointer for many years and years. Then is that second level. Then when we are like a Buddha, we can be. We can remain in the concentration for a year, like a Buddha-like. That's the third level. And then the wisdom, we say three wisdom. The first wisdom comes from listening. And listening alone is not enough. We have to contemplate. Contemplate the meaning, analyze it, right? And after analyzing, it is no point. We have to apply it. We have to familiarize with it, right? So these are the 6 paramitas. And these 6 parameters are from today, we explain from Mahayana point of view. So only difference between Mahayana way of practicing and Vajrayana, once you enter the Vajrayana. So now, is that Mahayana, you are at until time, maybe at the later end, I'm not sure, by the beginning at least, you are allowed to practice the accumulation of merit and wisdom separately. For example, you can say that right now you can consider I am John, I am Michael, I am Timothy, whatever, and I am offering generosity practice. I am offering to Buddha. I am being compassionate to all the mother sentient being. So it's okay for a Mahayana practitioner to do it with the concept that I am so and so, and I am offering, etc. In the beginning. And then after some time, when you reach certain level, then you have to start practicing the emptiness, etc. Right? So it's kind of like practicing the paramitas first, and then later, kind of applying the wisdom on the emptiness or the non-existent kind of, on top of that I doesn't exist. Maybe at the end of dedication, then the so-called the I or the others and the merit, is nothing inherently. Without having concept of who is doing this, to whom I dedicate, you can apply the end, right? So you can kind of practice separately. But the Vajrayana practitioner, even starting from the Chagyu level, Vajrayana practitioner has to start always together with the union practice. That means that, for example, when you are doing an offering, it cannot be that I am offering can be understood as something that is solid and then offer it. No. That's why before doing any Vajrayana offering, we always start with the word Om Subhava Shuddha Sarva Dharma Subhava Shuddhoham. That means all the phenomena are by nature pure, pure of all sort of concept, nothing existing inherently. And from that emptiness itself arises the flower, the palace, the pure land, etc. So you are offering the flower, yet without ever forgetting, without always being aware of the non-existing nature of the flower, that is arising from Dhammakaya, from emptiness. And you are offering to the Tara, yet not as an ordinary person, but Rangi Kejik, I have become Tara myself. My inherent, my appearance, union of my appearance, empty nature is my Tara's form from beginning of time. My empty and appearance nature of the sound is my Tara speech. My own nature of the mind, all my emotions or whatever, their nature being clear and empty from beginning of time is my Tara mind. So while you are fully in, you are not like I am, ordinary kind of person and I am offering to Tara. No, rather than that, it is all the universe dissolve into the Dhammakaya, and from that Dhammakaya, so-called the external emptiness or external form, when the external emptiness takes form, it is called the Guru Tara in front of you. And the internal or the internal emptiness, when it kind of takes form, it is called the Tara, you Tara. So even when you are doing the Tara practice, it's with the kind of the confidence that you being a Buddha, you being inseparable from the Guru in front of you. Right? So always with the remembrance of the awareness of the union. That is why the moment we do start Vajrayana practice, we have to always hold a bell and the bell and the Vajra. Right? The Vajra represents the existing part. The bell represents a non-existing part. Right? And it's very. I found when I was reading Guru Padmasambhava's biography, Dakini Mandara asked, "What is wisdom, and what is method?" And Guru Padmasambhava said very simply, the non-existing is the wisdom, existing is the method. So that means, all from the paramita, all the generosity, etc., are the method, and the emptiness is the wisdom. Right? So Vajra, when we are doing it together, holding together, Vajra represents it. All the phenomena's existential part is represented by the Vajra. And the bell represents, the non-existential part. Right? For example, when you listen to the bell sound also, bell sound also, it is an indication of the emptiness of the sound. There is a sound. When you try to find its nature, you will not be able to find. What is the sound made of? Where is it coming from? Where is it? What is its nature? Does it exist? Right? So bell represents the non-existing part, and the Vajra represents the existing part. And similarly, as I said a few days before also, in the Vajrayana, when you see, male and female Buddha, Guru Padmasambhava and Dakini Ishe Sogel, we think that, Guru Padmasambhava is the real my refuge, and Dakini Ishe Sogel is like his side girlfriend that I try to ignore and pretend not there. Not at all. Vajrayogini is the Chakrasambhara is my guru. Vajrayogini is someone that I have no choice but to visualize, but actually I prefer not to, because I am a very conservative person. Right? If you are like that, if you want to practice Vajrayana, then you cannot do like that. The Vajra, the male Buddha, represents the existential part, and the female Buddha represents the non-existing part. And they are joined together. We hold the Vajra and the bell together to know that that is the state of the universal truth all the time, whether you see it or not. In one way, we are existing, we are the physical form. Yet when you break down into what is this made of nature, you can break it down atomic level into nothingness. Yet that nothingness has existence. What does the Heart Sutra say? Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Other than emptiness, there is no form. Other than form, there is no emptiness. That's talking about union in a Mahayana. But in the Vajrayana, we don't like to. Mahayana is for the gentlemen and ladies, So Buddhas are also alone. Female Buddhas are alone, So we feel comfortable because we have a lot of concept about being Buddha. What is a practitioner? What is not? We have a lot of concept. And for time being, it's okay to have that kind of concept. For certain people, it's okay. So in the Vajrayana, everything is in your face, the truth, Especially that Chaji is little okay, at least the Tara is alone, But in the higher level, then it's all in your face. Right? The union is in your face. So, and the Vajra itself, the upper part of this is 9 point. Usually you have the 5 point, the 4 point, and the single on the top. They represent the 5 point Vajra. So the 5 point upper part represents the 5 Buddha. The 5 Buddha represents the empty nature of the 5 emotions: anger, jealousy, desire, ignorance, pride. And then below the 5 point represents the 5 female, Buddha, and they represent the empty nature of the 5 elements: earth, water, the space, etc. The 5 elements. And when we are holding this together, is to always remind us the union of all the phenomena. All the phenomena are appearing yet empty yet, appearing. Other than form, there's no emptiness. Other than emptiness, there's no form. The sound, the speech, etc. Sound and the thoughts, to remind of that. And because if you're able to practice this in a union way, that is the secret why the Vajrayana is a very quick way of getting enlightenment. Getting enlightened, is because of the union. Union is the speciality of the, the Vajrayana, heart of the Vajrayana.